Thanks for joining this webinar. My name is Natalie from Orchid, and today Anne and I will demonstrate new features in Orchid's EFT processing for Sage Intacct, as well as tips for consultants and end users. In the forthcoming product update for Orchid's EFT, we include the ability to create an EFT file for employee expenses reimbursements. We're also adding a new feature to create AR payments based on selecting a range of AR invoices. And we will then also demonstrate how to use EFT processing with AR payments. We'll then demonstrate and discuss a few tips that apply to using EFT for AP payments, AR payments, and employee expenses payments, such as how to name an EFT file, how to make the file name unique, how to view the payments already included in a file, tips for filtering and sorting payments that you want to include in a file, demonstrate how to upload a file to cloud service platforms using mapped drive, and similar method can be used with SFTP sites. We'll then review some special file types such as pre-note and positive pay files. Since January 2023, Orchid EFT Processing supports AP payments and AP advances, so you can create an EFT file from posted AP payments and AP advances. In May 2023, we added the ability to create an EFT file for AR payments. In December 2023, we're adding two main new features. The first one is the ability to create an EFT file based on posted employee expenses reimbursements. Second one is the ability to create AR payments automatically for selected AR invoices. Let's first look at streamlining the Sage Intacct employee expenses reimbursements process. You are now able to create EFT payment files in the format required by your bank, integrated with Sage Intacct time and reimbursement processing routines. So you post your employee expenses reimbursements and you can then select them to include them in a file. Like Orchid's EFT for AP payments and AR payments, we support hundreds of bank formats and others are created on request. We support domestic payments, cross-border payments, positive pay, NACHA files, CPA 005, SEPA files, ISO 222, BPay files, and a lot of other banking files in many countries around the world. We also support user-definable formats. The employee bank details and the company's banking details are held in EFT processing in Sage Intacct. So no processing is done on Orchid's website. It is all held securely in Sage Intacct. And we support user-definable screen labels to reflect the bank terminology when updated the employee and the company bank details. The process to create the EFT file is to enter, approve, and post employee expense reimbursements, very similar to what you do with AP and AR. You can then select the payments that you want to pay and generate an EFT file. Next step is to download the EFT file, which you can then import into your banking software. And if it's successful, you can confirm it and finalize a particular file. You can then subsequently view the payment details and which file they've been included in. This is what Anne is now going to demonstrate in more details. Over to you, Anne.
Thanks, Natalie. Just as we can with accounts payable and accounts receivable, where you use the Sage Intacct payment processing in accounts payable to post your vendor payments and vendor advances, or you use the accounts receivable in Sage Intacct payment processing and post your AR payments and advances, and then you use Orchid's EFT payment requests to select those payments that you want to make via EFT, generate the EFT file, download, and upload to the bank. And the process is the same for employee expense reimbursements. You use the Sage Intacct payment processing routines to enter, approve, and post the employee reimbursements. And once the employee reimbursements are posted, you can use the EFT payment requests in Orchid, so that's the EFT employee payment requests screen, to select the payments that you want to make via EFT, generate the EFT file, then download the EFT file and upload it into the bank. And once it's been confirmed by the bank, you can confirm in the EFT file list screen. And similar to AP and AR processing of EFT files, if there's an issue with the file, the bank says there's some problem with the employee's details or the bank's details, you can hold the file, go to the employee, amend some of the details, or go to the bank and amend some of the details, then refresh the file, then you can download it again and upload to the bank. And you would use EFT file list to confirm the file once the bank confirms the file is okay. And this is the process that I'm going to show you now. With the release of EFT processing for employee reimbursements, on the Orchid EFT menu, you have a new option to select the EFT employee payment requests. So this screen shows you all those payments that have been made to employees who are configured for EFT processing and using banks that are configured for EFT processing. So we have these payments ready to be sent via EFT to the bank. I will show you later how to configure an employee for EFT processing and how to configure a bank for EFT processing. And on the EFT employee payment request, we can use these hot links to verify which payments we need to select. So from here we can click on the employee ID to see how the employee's configuration for EFT is and check that if we need to. And we're also able to see the payments. And this shows us the payment record and the expense record that the payment has been applied to. So these are all the payments yet to be made via EFT, but they are posted payments against the employees. And we're currently looking at all those payments that are not included in an EFT file yet in this date range. I could select all those included in an EFT file. Again, it's applying the date range that I have filtered here. So these are the payments that we've made to these employees via an EFT file. And you can see that the status of the EFT file is confirmed. That means we've downloaded it, imported it to the bank, it's been confirmed by the bank, and we've gone to confirm the file. We could also look at all the payments that we have in our filters at the top, and we can see a mixture of those we have paid and those we haven't paid. But if I select not included in any EFT file, I could then select all these payments and click Generate to create an EFT file. I could filter by file format first, so to do all my notches before I do my Bank of Scotland, the International CSV or the BACS file, or I could just select them all, and in this case EFT Processing will create 3 files for me because it creates 1 file per bank per file type. So although these are both for the 500 CHK bank, which is my UK bank account, I will get 2 files because there's 2 different file types associated with this bank. So I'll go ahead and click Generate, and you'll see it creates 3 EFT files for us. 3 files have been generated, and when I click OK, all those payments will drop off the list because I'm still filtering by not included in any EFT file. If I now select all, I will see my recent files that have been created, and the status is new because I haven't done anything with them yet, plus the older transactions that we saw previously where the status is confirmed. Again, this filter is just in the state range. So now if we go to our EFT file list, and because I'm sorted by most recent created first, our 3 new files are at the top. My NACHA format for the $100 checking account and my 2 UK formats for the Bank of Scotland. So from here I could view the transactions in the file, so I can see all the fields that are going to be included in the file from the bank itself and from each of the employees, and the payments and the associated expense records that they apply to. So I could view the file, or I can download the file. So download will create the physical file, in this case called apeft.txt, and including the date and a sequence number of the number of files that we've created this day. And these are configurable on the EFT Bank record. I could open up this file to have a look, and that is the formatted NACHA as you would need to do these payments to these employees. You would now take this file and upload to the bank, and once the bank confirms that the file has been imported correctly, you could come and confirm the status of this file. Confirm means that no more changes can be made to that file. But if, for example, let's download our 500 CHK checking account, the Bank of Scotland format. So we download that file, view the file, and because it's a CSV, Excel has started automatically to open that up, and we would upload that to the bank. And for example, if the bank said that one of the employees' bank account details was not correct, or the format of the file was not correct, we could say hold on this file. After clicking hold, the status of the file will go from exported to on hold. And now we could go to one of the employees in that file to change the details on the record, or if needs be, we could go to the bank account, the EFT bank account itself, and change some of the details there. So we can do a quick link from here to look at the 500 CHK account that is associated with the UK Bank of Scotland International CSV format. And here we can see the configuration we've done. So these are the bank account details for this payment, or these payments, the way we want to call the file name. And if there was some problem, for example, we had the incorrect BIC code or IBAN number for this particular bank, we could edit and make changes here and then refresh the file. Or we could go to one of the payments in that file. So if we have a quick look to see which employees are included in the file, 1003, 1005 for example, we could go to our time and expenses, go to our employees, and edit and change the EFT details for the employee. So looking at 1003, Orchid EFT Processing for employee expenses allows you to enter the EFT details on the Orchid EFT tab. And once you select the appropriate EFT format for that particular employee, the fields for that format will be turned on that need to be completed. And here, for example, if we had the incorrect SWIFT code for this particular employee, we could update it, and then we could go and refresh the file. Where appropriate, Orchid EFT will give help or tooltip text for fields. For example, in this case, the charges, who's going to bear the charges for the EFT payment. Is it the beneficiary? Is it shared? Or is it borne by the remitter themselves? So once we've changed some details, we can go back to the EFT file list. And the status of the file is on hold because we put it on hold, and now we're able to refresh this particular entry. So refresh means make a copy of the existing file so we know from an audit point of view what was in each of the files that have been generated, and we've got a new file with the new details. On the new file we've still got a history, so we can click on the history and we can see this is the file that was replaced by this one with all the new details. The status is new, so we could go ahead, view if we need to, and download again. And this time when we download, a new file is created. We could have had a file name that would have done this auto numbering for ourselves, but this is the new file, and this we would then upload to the bank. And once confirmed, we would come back and confirm the file. So from the EFT files, we can, as we've seen, we can link to the EFT bank record and do edit and make changes here. And we can also link to the file format itself. And this is the EFT file format. So what do we need to set up for employees to make employee reimbursements via EFT? So in the Orchid EFT menu, the first thing you need to do, you need to load your EFT file format. The EFT files that we created were for NACHA and for the Bank of Scotland, BACS and international format. So you need to load up the formats that you need. And these formats can be used both for your direct debits, for your accounts payable payments, and for your employee reimbursements. You don't necessarily need a different format for the different payment types, but that depends on the bank itself. And once you have the formats, you then need to go and associate those formats with the banks themselves. So in the EFT bank record, you would associate with each of your bank accounts the EFT format that you must use for your payments. So that's AP payments and employee reimbursements, or your receipts. That's if you're doing direct debits. So for example, from my 100 CHK, which is my US dollar checking account, I can do both payments and receipts using the NACHA format. But some banks you would have a different format for direct debits and for payments. And here we have associated the formats that we saw for the Bank of Scotland, the International CSV and the BACS format with our 500 CHK, which is our UK pounds checking account. So we've imported our format, we've associated the format with the appropriate bank account, and also on the employees, on the EFT tab for those particular employees that we're going to pay via EFT. And here I've created myself a view showing the EFT details so I can quickly see the employees' EFT details at a glance. But if you go to edit one of these employees, you will find on the Orchid EFT tab, you need to select the EFT file type that you're going to use for this particular employee and then fill in the details as appropriate. So for my NACHA, I need to know if the account is a checking account or a savings account. And that's all you need to do your EFT processing for employee reimbursements. You configure your employees, you configure your format, you configure your banks. And then for all the expenses that you have paid, so you've selected the expenses to reimburse and you have reimbursed them either by record transfer, or if you're doing positive pay, you've done it by printing a check. And once you have a posted reimbursement, you will be able to select those payments for EFT on the EFT employee payment request. Back to you, Natalie.
Thanks, Anne, for this demo of EFT for employee expenses reimbursement. To use EFT processing for employee expenses, you need to install and configure the EFT processing customization. If you're already using EFT for AP payments or AR payments, you would still need to download the latest update that includes support for employee expenses, import it into EFT. You can then enter your license that supports employee expenses, configure your EFT formats if it's different, configure EFT banks if required, and then add banking details to EFT employees. And all this is documented in the online help for EFT processing. The next major new feature of the December 2023 release of Orchid's EFT processing is the ability to create AR payments in bulk for selected AR invoices. This helps streamline the collection process for companies that use direct debits to receive clients' payments, because out of the box, you need to create your AR payments one customer at a time in EFT Intacct. With EFT processing, you're able to select outstanding AR invoices by various criteria. So EFT processing will then create AR payments applied to the selected invoices, one payment per invoice, and the users can then include the AR payments in an EFT file. Anne will now demonstrate the new features to create the AR payments, as well as going through the process of using EFT to create AR payment files. Over to you, Anne.
Thanks, Natalie. Create AR payments, or AR receipts, depending on what part of the world you're in, allows you to select a payment method, the bank that you're going to post the payments against, and a payment date. And then you can select all the outstanding invoices that you want to create applied AR payments for. You can sort or filter by any of the columns to help you with the invoice selection. You can define the exchange rate if necessary, and you can override the payment amount or payment date on any one of the rows. And once you've selected your invoices and set your defaults the way you want them to be, you can click Create Receipt, which will create a posted payment one-to-one with the invoices and applied to the invoice. And then these posted AR payments can then be used in your EFT file creation. You can select the AR payments that are made for customers that are defined for EFT against a bank that has been defined for EFT. You can select those payments, generate the EFT file, then download it and upload to the bank. And if accepted by the bank, you can confirm. Or if there are any issues, you can say hold the file, do any amendments you need to the bank or the customer, then refresh the file, re-download and upload to the bank. And this is the process I'm going to show you now. Create AR Payments or Create Receipts provides you a quick and easy way to create your receipts applied to invoices for your direct debits. So instead of using the accounts receivable receive payments, where you have to customer by customer show the invoices, select them, and then create the payment, you can use the Orchid EFT Create Receipt function. So Create Receipts shows you all the invoices which are outstanding. You can define your payment method, which bank you want the receipts to be deposited into, and define your receipt date. And then you can sort the outstanding invoices by any of the columns to make the selection quicker. For example, you could sort by base currency, to group by currency, or you could sort by invoice number or customer ID. Or you could select by, for example, currency to select the transactions that you want to create a receipt for. So if I wanted to do my US dollar transactions, I could select by currency and then select the transactions, either all or the ones I want to pay. And then if I need to, I can change the amount to receive. If I was dealing with multiple currencies, I could define the exchange rate, and I could go ahead and create the receipts. And EFT Processing is now creating one receipt per invoice, applying it to the invoice using the bank and the receipt date as configured on this screen. I can then refresh my screen to select my British pounds payments, and then go ahead and create my receipts. I could select the appropriate payment method and bank account, receipt date for my British pounds, and go ahead and create my receipts. And EFT Processing will create one receipt per invoice applied to the invoice for the appropriate bank. And after creating the AR payments or receipts, I can use the EFT AR payment requests to show me all the receipts that have been posted for customers that are configured for EFT against banks that are configured for EFT but which have not yet been sent to the bank for direct debit. So here I could go ahead and select them all, or sort by currency and select only the ones that I want. And go ahead and generate an EFT file. I could have selected the US dollar ones at the same time, and it would have created me two files, or I could come back and select them now. But if I want to select only those ones for Nacha, I could select by currency and by format, and then select all and generate a file. And after generating the two files, we can go to the EFT file lists to view the contents of the file, download the files and upload them to the bank. So here we have the two files that we've just generated for Nacha and the UK Bank of Scotland BACS XML format. To configure a customer for EFT, you go to the customer record, and on the Orchid EFT tab, you configure the format for the direct debits. In this case, Nacha, and you fill in the details required for the bank for direct debits. And to configure a bank for EFT, you need to associate your bank code with the associated format for the particular type. So in this case, our 500 CHK British pounds bank is configured both for payments and for receipts. So vendor payments and AR customer direct debits using the same format. And on the record, you have the appropriate bank code, format code, and the fields that you need for that particular format. And that gives you a quick overview of our new Create Receipt, so Create AR Payment or Create Receipt functionality in Sage Intacct. Back to you, Natalie.
Thanks, Anne, for this demonstration of using Orchid's EFT processing to create AR payments and then creating an EFT file from those AR payments. In the next part of the presentation, we're going to go through some frequently asked questions and tips for consultants and users of Orchid's EFT based on a lot of questions that we've had over the last few months. This is all included in an FAQ section of the help for Orchid EFT processing that will be published in the next few days. So we'll look at tips to use variables to name the EFT file, in particular how to make the EFT file unique. We'll look at how to view which files a payment is included in, how to filter and sort payments to be able to add them in a file, look at an example of uploading an EFT file to a cloud service platform. In our example, it's going to be Google Drive. And the same logic can be applied to upload a file to SFTP sites. Using browser's profile, the mapped drive, and the client service platform or SFTP platform's ability to sync between your local machine and the actual platform. We will discuss some special file types such as positive pay, prenote, and how to use effective date in a file. All these tips apply to AP payments, AR payments, and employee expenses. First tip is, how can I make an EFT file name unique? Many banks require the file name to be unique. So there's different variables that you can use in the EFT bank configuration depending on how you process the file. You can use a combination of the date, the file sequence number, and a daily run number to make the file unique. So if you generate multiple files for the bank on a given day, for example, you would use a variable called N, and variables in the EFT file naming you put in curly bracket. So we have an example here where we give it a name, either a name that we set or the name that the bank wants, some hard-coded text characters. Then we could put the date in the format that's required, the year, the month, the day. S is a file sequence number, so it's reset, or the number is increased every time you download a file for a particular bank. And N is a sequence number for the day. So the first time you download a file on a given day, it's going to be set to 1. If you download another file on that same day, N will be 2. And it is reset to 1 the next day. Whereas S, the file sequence number, is not reset. You can go and, if you need to regenerate a file with the same number, you can go and reset it on the EFT bank. So all this configuration happens on the EFT bank. And we have some more examples of the fields that are required in the EFT bank, including variables we can use in the file name. So going to Sage Intacct, to Orchid EFT, EFT banks, we can see here that we are using these various variables in our file name. So here it's just YY, the last 2 digits of the year, month, day. We have a sequence number in being a unique number for the day. So if I look at this particular bank, you can see that the file sequence number is already set to 158. So we've already downloaded 158 files for that particular bank. Next tip is, can I view payments included in an EFT file? Yes, you can. By default, on the payment request screen, you can view payments not yet included in a file, but there is an option to switch that to view the payments already included in the file, and applies to AP payment requests as well as AR and employee expenses. So let's look at this on the AP payment request screen. Defaults to not in any file, but I can change this to included in an EFT file. We're seeing the last month of payments, but I could change that date, or I can filter by vendor to select a particular vendor. So we can see we've got this new option now. You click in the field that you can filter by, and you can select all or just select one of the vendors. I'm going to select just vendor 292, and the screen is now refreshed with those payments. I can find my payment and say, okay, this payment was included in the 10643 file, and the file is exported. So I can copy that that file ID, and if I need to see detail of the file, I can actually view the payment detail from here. Drill to the payment detail or drill to the vendor. But if I want to get to the EFT file, I can go to the EFT file list and select my file ID. We've touched on how to filter when looking at payments included in a file, but let's have a slightly closer look at the options we have to filter records to include in an EFT file. And again, that applies to AP payments, AR payments, and employee expenses payments. By default, the screen filters to transactions 1 month ago. So you can filter, you can change that default, and you can filter by any field on the first row. So you can type in a filter criteria using equal or greater than or just greater for most fields. But in the latest update, you now also have the ability to select records from the list. So for example, on the status box, you can just choose just the on hold files or just the new files. On the payment request screens, you can filter by payment record by just selecting the payment record you want. Let's look at this in Sage Intacct. So if I'm looking at payments not included in a file, defaults to payments from a month ago, I can change this to say, you can see our filter is greater than 28th of July 2023. So I've got more payments now. I can filter by payment currency. As you can see here, I've got payments in British pounds or US dollars. So if I want just the British pounds, I select this. If I want just the USD, I can just select it like this. And we can see the fields that is being filtered. Some italic, meaning I've got a filter active. I can filter by vendor ID. Select all. Typically with a payment amount, you can select them like this, but most likely you would say greater than, let's say 5,000. And those filters are remembered if you log out and log back into the same company in Sage Intacct.
One of the questions we are frequently asked about EFT processing is whether or not the EFT file can be SFTP'd to a site, either the bank site or your own internal site, and whether or not you can save the EFT files to a cloud service map drive. Both of these can be done, and you can follow the knowledge base articles in this frequently asked questions to see how it is done. But I'm going to show you how to work with cloud services, particularly with Google Drive. Initially, you install the cloud service application on the workstation or workstations, and then you would map the cloud service drive to the particular drive that you're going to download the files to. So I have already installed Google Drive on my laptop, and I have configured the drive for Google Drive. And then it's a question of working within your browser and setting your downloads folder to that mapped drive. So in my browser, in the downloads, and in the download settings, I have mapped my download folder under this particular profile to the G drive and a particular folder on the G drive. And when I look at my settings, the G drive is my Google Drive, and I've mapped through to the Sage Intacct folder there. So you can have multiple profiles for the users, one when using Sage Intacct, where the downloads drive is mapped to the Google Drive that you want to upload to, and then use a different profile for downloading other files from the internet. Once I've done this setting, then when I'm in my EFT file list and I go to download a file, the file is straight away downloaded to that particular folder. Depending on your permissions, we can still open that file. But if we go to look at it, we see it's on the Google Drive in the Sage Intacct folder. My options are set that I can still view this file even when I'm offline, so the copy is kept on this machine as well. But typically you would just have it only online, and then you would upload the file from the Google Drive to the bank.
You would follow very similar steps to upload an EFT file to an SFTP site. You use a program to map a drive in Windows Explorer to your SFTP server, and that can work with Mac OS as well. Then you use a profile in your browser to ensure that the EFT file is downloaded to the drive that is mapped to an SFTP server. And that program will then do the upload to SFTP. If you have any questions on that, you can look at the online help or contact us. In the final part of this presentation, we're going to discuss some special types of EFT files. And first, a question we have regularly is, if you are using EFT processing for AP, AR and employee, do you need different file formats? This really depends on your banks and which banks you're using for these different payments. But if you're using the same bank for AP payments and AR payments, and it's the same file specifications from your bank, you can use the same EFT file formats. Many EFT formats are configured to work for both AP and AR, but you'd still need to add two EFT bank records, one for a payment type and one for of type receipt. But both banks can use the same EFT file types. Let's have a look at this in Intacct in EFT banks. So I'm focusing on my bank 100 CHK, and I could see I have type payment and type receipt in that list. So just let's use our ability to filter, and let's look at just the NACHA bank format. So I'm looking at the NACHA file format for bank 100 CHK. You can see I've got one of type payment and one of type receipt. They both have the same account number, but might have a different file name for EFT AP and AR. And they would have a different file sequence number. For employee expenses, there are payments that typically you would use the same bank type. So if I look at this one, You can see it is the Nacha file format. It's the same file type, and the same with the receipt one. So type receipt with the same file format. Let's continue and look at some other file types. Positive pay files are files that are used, that some banks require when you're sending checks to your vendors. The checks can only be processed if the bank has a file that matches the check reference, amount and vendor. So it is generally a simpler file type, and there are a lot of banks we have a lot of positive pay file formats for EFT banks, and the process and the setup is very similar for standard EFT files and for positive pay files. You need to configure the bank to be linked to the positive pay EFT file format for your bank. For the vendor, you say that you enter the detail for the positive pay format. You would then create, approve, print and post your required check payments in Sage Intacct. And when you have an approved printed check payment in your AP posted payment list, you can use the EFT payment request to select the payments required and generate an EFT file. So, and then the EFT file is to download the positive pay file and send it to the bank. So I won't go through all these steps because, as I mentioned, they are really the same as the standard EFT files that we've looked at today. But we will look at a couple of positive pay files that we have in our system for EFT banks. If we now go to our EFT formats, I don't want to select on pre-note, but I want to select on PP, since most of our formats for positive pay are called PP something. So we've got Canada PP, a USA positive pay, and another Canada positive pay for another bank. So let's look at the Canada one. So it's for the TD bank, and it's got 40 characters in the payee names. As you see, it's generally a slightly shorter format. And then if I look at the USA positive pay file, that's for Capital One positive pay. Here are the details. If you want to see what it looks like in the vendor, let's look at this vendor. I now want to pay this vendor differently by positive pay. So I select the vendor, go to the Orchid EFT tab, and here I'm going to select the Canada TD positive pay format. So as you can see, I've only got to update these fields for that bank. So once I've done that, I can then post my check and add this to payments to River Glen Insurance for that file format. So we've seen how to use positive pays with check payments. In a similar fashion, we have a special file type called a pre-note file. So pre-notification is a process that creates a $0 transaction, also called a pre-note transaction type file for the bank, as a test that the vendors or the employees' EFT details are set up correctly. The pre-note file can be generated in one or two ways depending on how you control the process. You can control it from the EFT vendor record or from the EFT bank record. And there is a detailed video presenting how to process pre-note file on the Orchid website. So I won't go through all the details, but let's just look at what pre-notes look like in Sage Intacct. So let's go and look at our EFT formats. I can select formats that include pre-note. In this particular database, we have one pre-note format for the Nacha format. Now if we look at our EFT banks, we've got one bank configured for a pre-note, the 100 CHK. So if I look at this bank, you can see that not all the fields are required for a pre-note file, but we have this file description called EFT payment. And basically configured in that pre-note file is the fact that it is going to be a $0 transaction, but you still need to create your payment. And then if I look at my vendor, on the Orchid EFT tab for neighborhood printers, I currently have Natcha, but I can change it. If I need to send a pre-note for this vendor, I would send it to Natcha. And you can see I've still got to put in an account number, a routing number, and then I have different transaction codes. It's going to be 23 for a pre-note for checking account and 33 for a pre-note for savings account, as opposed to the transaction code that I put in for a not the pre-note format. So I'm going to set this one to 23. Save that. And once I've processed my pre-note, I can come back and change the format back to Natcha. It knows to use the same routing number, but I don't have my pre-note transaction code anymore. So you can look at the detailed presentation on using pre-note with Sage Intacct on the Orchid website. Final point we're going to look at today is, can I set a payment effective date in an EFT file? And the answer is that EFT Processing supports setting an effective date in the future. That's assuming that your bank file format supports sending a file in advance. So to control the effective date, on our EFT file list, you see by default the effective date is the date that we've created the file, but I can come here and change it to 30th of November and then download the file. We've looked at a few tips for using EFT processing. Finally, let's have a look at our roadmap for next year. We're looking at enhancing the ability to create AR payments with more advanced filters, looking at adding additional security profiles to allow only some users to amend and approve vendor, customer, and employee EFT details, the ability to export EFT file creation for reconciliation purposes, the ability to view the audit trails for EFT formats and EFT banks. So currently changes to those details are actually logged, but you can't view the history. And we'll also look at providing the ability to email customizable remittance advices. Thank you very much for your time. We are now going to take questions for the remaining part of the webinar. If you want any more information on EFT processing for Sage Intacct, you can look at our website, orchid.systems, and also a reminder that in the resources page you have access to brochures, videos, our training guides, online help, and other resources for EFT processing for Intacct.